day, women, fabulous women. This is Jerry DiPiano, and this is the Love Mia Vita podcast. Today, my special guest is Kamili Wilson, and I am just so delighted to introduce Kamili to you, but she will do much, much better with sharing with you her background and her commitment to women, and specifically women who are facing the challenges of the transition. Kamili, welcome to the Love Mia Vita podcast.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here with you today.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you landed here, and why you are committed to helping women with the transition.
Sure. I don't know how unique my story is. After talking to many other women, I seem to have find myself in this menopause space as a result of firsthand experience. But I am the founder and CEO of Menopause Made Modern by Claret Circle, which is a web-based user-generated ratings and review platform that's really designed to connect women with information, resource, products, and services to inform their own treatment approach to managing the multiple symptoms associated with menopause transition. I myself am in perimenopause. I'm actively in perimenopause. I'm 47, soon to be 48 years old. And I started down this path really through research. At about 43 years old, I started experiencing what I now know are my first symptoms related to perimenopause or menopause transition, as I tend to use those interchangeably. But my earliest symptoms, and I was not at all prepared for them at 43 years old, were a change in my menstrual cycle, and I had always been pretty regular. Some hormonal acne, which kind of puts you in the mind of puberty 2.0, and was quite frustrating and embarrassing at times. But the one that took me most by surprise and concerned me most were mood swings, and specifically intense bouts of rage that were really disproportionate to anything that I was experiencing, that was being said or done to me. And that really kind of jarred me, right? There were days where I felt so unpleasant that I didn't want to be around myself. And so I was like, what's going on with me? One of the things that kind of did bring it to my attention and really had me explore and want me to understand what is going on with me. I have a 17-year-old son who's now 17. But about 4 years ago, so he would have been 13, and in my earliest stages of experiencing these things, I came in from work one day, and my son was already home, and I can't even remember what trigger. It could have been something very minor, and I started raging my term, and in the middle of it, I stopped. And I was really taken aback by how my son was looking at me. He was looking at me like I had three heads. And I said, "Why are you looking at me like that?" And he just says, I don't know what I did." And really, it just kind of brought me out of that. And I proceeded to explain to him that, son, I'm so sorry. Mom is hormonal. She's perimenopausal. And you know how when you're really mean to mom, again, he's 13, you're really mean to mom and you can't help it and you can't explain why. Well, those are hormones. And when we can control it, we have to work hard to be really good to each other. And I hugged him, and then I went upstairs to my room and I cried. And I cried because what came up for me was how many women don't have the language or the understanding to know what's going on with them, who feel quote unquote crazy. And then how are their children and their loved ones experiencing them in those situations, in those dynamics? And I came away with, that's not okay, right? And I actually blogged about that experience, and I started blogging earlier really more for my own edification. It was, I think maybe I had 3 readers at the time. I didn't know who was gonna read about my experience, but it was more cathartic and therapeutic, to get what I was experiencing, out into the world, to articulate it and to share it with others. I was also informed, by the lack of, diversity, cultural, racial, and ethnic diversity, as I went looking and seeking out information around perimenopause, through storytelling. Many of the images that were present were of, Eurocentric, white women, but even conveying much older, right, in their 70s, 80s, white haired. And this was so far from my own experience, that I also felt compelled, to really put my voice out there and to contribute to a space, an inclusive, safe space where women of color felt that they could come and learn more about menopause, and share their stories and get information.
I'm so grateful that that you're sharing this. And as a menopausal, actually postmenopausal woman myself, but reflecting on my own perimenopause and some of the stages that I went through, I am highly empathetic. I lived that too. I remember when we were dealing with my dad who had a chronic illness, and there was a lot of family dynamics. Come from a large Italian family, so you can just imagine there's a lot of emotion there. Period. But we were dealing with issues related to his chronic illness, and my mom said something, and I just popped off. I mean, I just went off. And normally I'm pretty, I had a nickname years ago, Ms. Laidback, because I tend to, I believe in grace under pressure, at least at the office, but not when it came to my family. So my husband, my brother, my sister, and my mom just, their jaws dropped. And I felt horrible. So I ran, I actually escaped. My mom said, "Oh, I'm sure that, she's okay. She's just having a meltdown because she loves her dad so much." Wrong.
Yeah.
I was experiencing this menopausal symptom of, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I can't control my hormones. Ran up to my old bedroom, locked the door, and I just was so embarrassed. And of course, then we did all the hugging and I'm sorry and what have you with all the family members. And I think they all thought, geez, she's really way too caught up in this. Nobody really attributed it, including me, to this was perimenopause. This was one of the symptoms of perimenopause. Sort of what were the stages that you were experiencing? Obviously, you shared the one, and I find that one a very troubling one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Personally, I find that troubling because I like being in control, and I was clearly out of control.
It's you know it I'm still actively experiencing it, right? I think one of the things, that floored me early on in my research when, I started to kind of go to the internet to figure out what's going on with me, because that's the other thing, Jerry, is that I've had a lifelong or decades long relationship with an OBGYN. I started my menstrual cycle, very early at the age of 11, and had developed, severe dysmenorrhea by the time I was 13. So I've been going to an OBGYN since I was 13, and left, but never discussed this life stage or what to expect, or what I would, that it could last up to 10 years, that there were upwards of 30 symptoms that I could experience on a right at any given time on a rolling basis over the course of that 10 years, right? And so that actually has been my experience. So, I'm about 4 or 5 years in, knowingly, into perimenopause, and, I'm still very much, affected by different conditions that will manifest. I'm currently experiencing, dryness, right? And it's in a myriad of ways, or a number of ways. Myriad is a bit of an extreme, but a number of ways. First manifested with, dry, brittle hair, dry skin, and those were things that I was managing okay. And then I developed dry eye, which I was not at all familiar with, and has been quite uncomfortable and at times disruptive to my life because it's my eyes. Sometimes there's pain, sometimes there's itching. I can't wear eye makeup because it exacerbates that. And so, as a woman, I have to be on camera sometimes. And so it adds to my anxiety around what must I look like without my eye makeup on. So it's interesting how some of these things compound.
Oh, it's so true. So I remember years ago when I used to commute to New York City to Midtown Manhattan with a friend, and we were sitting on the train, and she looked at me in with a face of horror, and she said, "I think I'm dying." And I was confused. We were in our 30s. We weren't, so what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "I think I'm bleeding through my pants."
Mm,
Um, and she said, this has been, I've had these episodes before, infrequently, but I've started having more of them. And she said, and I couldn't even tell my husband because he said, you know, well, wait a minute. Why are you buying all these pads? You used to use tampons and now
mm,
you're buying pads, and what's going on with your body? And she couldn't tell him. And she wasn't working in the area of women's health, and I was, and had been doing some research at the time. And I said, I think I know what's going on. We'll get you sorted out. So we managed to put a coat around her waist, got her to the
yeah.
restroom. She found what she needed to find to keep things under control until we landed in Trenton, New Jersey. And then she made it home. And I said, look, why don't we have, a chat about this? I think you may be in perimenopause, early
Mm,
menopause. And she's, well, I'm 37.
mm,
But we forget that perimenopause, so there are many stages, even of perimenopause and menopause, and we don't often recognize those symptoms. So you described sort of the hormonal changes that occur when things seem to be going awry, and the dryness, right? Well, we know when as our skin ages, yes, it's going to get dry, and our hair is going to get dry, and we're going to lose hair, and we take for granted that that's just part of maturing.
yeah.
But it is a sign that our estrogen levels are declining. Even the changes in our menstrual cycles, and that's really the more obvious one, right? So
Mm-hmm.
start to
Mm-hmm.
have changes in your menstrual cycle. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that. So, the it happens regularly, right?
Yeah.
For most for women, if it happens, every 28 or every 30 days or whatever your normal cycle is, it's your normal. It's
That's right.
your
That's right.
When you start to see that deviation, how does that show up
Oh my
on
goodness.
on a
It's
day?
it's incredibly stressful and concerning. And for me, that was one that coupled when I noticed a change in my cycle, and it was coupled with the mood swings and the hormonal acne. That's when I started to put the picture together. But I'd always had, as I mentioned, I started my period at age 11, and I'd always had a pretty consistent menstrual cycle. It would last about 5 days. The first couple of days would be the heaviest, and then it would slow down. And then it was around this 43, 40, 44 years old. Not consistently, every month was different. Now, some days, I would have my period, and the first 2 days would be lighter, and then the third and fourth day would be heavier. Well, that's not normal. It was when I had my period within 2 weeks of each other that caused the biggest concern. I thought, oh my goodness, this is not sustainable. I can't have a period every 2 weeks. But it was very stressful. It was very stressful, and I've spoken to other women, Jerry, and I'm sure there's no shortage of stories. Women who travel with every kind of iteration of sanitary napkin, tampon, because of this, it actually informs and guides their life, their menstrual cycle, not knowing when it's going to come or what the flow is going to be. I've spoken to women who just did not wear white. did not wear white.
That would be me.
I mean, this is how it's affecting our lives. Like, there are women who are planning meetings, events, activities around their cycle at this life stage. And these are things that we need to be talking to each other about and supporting each other through.
It's it's so when we think about there are multiple stages, 4 stages, and we start to we start to think about this as it, in the context of our menstrual cycle, because right, we were 10 or 11 years old, and they brought us all into a room and they segregated us. So it was
Mm-hmm.
the young women went to one room, the young men went to another room. I was wondering, what were the young men talking about? Like when the young women
Yeah.
were talking about their periods, what were the young men talking about? They should probably have left us all. This is probably a generational thing too, but they probably should have left us in the same room
Agreed.
so that the guys and the girls could have respect for one another as to what we were each
Going
going to
through.
see and experience in terms of our transitions from puberty into adulthood, etc. But I remember that we, basically were told that we're going to have, our periods each month, and that we would have to use some form of protection. And now you could potentially conceive, so you
Mm-hmm.
can become a mom. But it depends on where you went to school. You might not be told about birth control,
That's
right?
right.
You
That's
might not
right.
be told about sexually transmitted infections. And then no one told us about pregnancy. No one told us
Mm-hmm.
about menopause or perimenopause. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about the lack of information that women have historically received, look, you shouldn't have to go to medical school or to become a pharmaceutical scientist
That's right.
to understand your own body. And it's a shame because we don't know enough about it. So when we look at the various stages of menopause, we know that you'll start experiencing things as you and I did with hormones. And then there's that thing called a hot flash. I had no idea what a hot flash was.
Oh, the night sweats. Yes, the lovely night
I was
sweats.
having night sweats. I kept calling them night
Mm.
sweat because I'm pretty slender, and I was like, oh, my body mass index is low. I probably don't have enough fat. That's so I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably just a little, and maybe I'm amenorrheic. I mean, like amenorrheic. Yes, you are amenorrheic. You are also perimenopausal. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Nobody told me that.
Mm. No, that the night sweats are also, those have, I've suffered with those for the past few years, and really they're frustrating. I mean, it does explain why so many women are tired and exhausted every day. It's because we're not getting adequate sleep. And pardon me, a correlation through my research, not anything that's necessarily been shared with me through discussions with my own doctor, is that when I do manage my sugar intake closer to bedtime, if I have something sweet or if I consume sugar after 7 p.m., the likelihood that I'm going to have a night sweat increases. If I have a cocktail after 6 p.m., the likelihood that I'm going to have night sweat increases. So at least that's helpful for me now, and I can make an informed decision. Am I going to have this cocktail? Am I going to have this piece of cake? And weigh the trade-offs. But so much of this is information that I've had to kind of come to on my own, or stumble across. And um, certainly 4 years ago when I started blogging, um, there was much less conversation, right? I don't even know that the conversations that you're driving today through the Mia Vita platform were taking place with regularity. But now more people are starting to talk about it, share their own experiences, empower with information that you should ask your healthcare providers. And I just want to be a contributing voice to that.
You are definitely a contributing voice, and I believe that women who turned 40 in the year 2020, which is a gigantic demographic,
Mm-hmm.
um, have really led what we refer to as a menopause revolution.
Yeah.
And 40 is not old. I mean, 40 is
Right.
young. And by the way, under 40s are potentially going through some of these early symptoms, peri and premenopausal symptoms. And so they want to talk about it and they want to know about it and they don't want to be stigmatized. So there is a
That's
certain
right.
amount of ageism, right? So if you share with your colleagues and your friends that you're experiencing some of these symptoms, you know, the ageism does creep in. So
It
it does
does.
surprise me that it wasn't a bit of a taboo topic. Well, I would suggest that if you're a guy and you're experiencing erectile dysfunction, that, you know, that's talked about, and that's
Yeah,
actually that's talked about on television, and it's talked
that's right.
about in radio and in ads, and you see guys in their 30s that are, you know, using products. Some are devices, some are prescription drugs or other types of herbal remedies.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why we don't talk about it more.
I I agree, and we have to some things, you know, have been deemed taboo. Certainly, sexual health, sexual wellness, but it's certainly how I learned about the great work that you all are doing, right, with Pharma and your Mia Vita product is that vaginal dryness, right? I talked about how I'm experiencing other forms of dryness, dry hair, dry skin. These were things that were normal to me. Well, you know, dry eye. Okay, this is not normal. Let me look into this. Had never had a problem with what I call vaginal hydration, right? Until I did, and was completely unprepared for that. Set out researching, learned the distinction between vaginal lubricant versus vaginal moisturizer, and that we should be hydrating our vagina on a regular basis like we do our skin. This is something that I had no idea about, that had never been discussed with me. And yes, I have been using Mia Vita products. That is, no one asked me for that, but I have been, and it's made a significant difference in the quality of my life. And these are things, right? You know, how many, you know, in what forums, how many opportunities do we are we in a situation where we're comfortable or asked to talk about our vaginal health and well-being, right? So
It's so we joke about the, oh, you know, I have infrequent periods, or sometimes they come too soon. So if your cycle is
mhm.
28 days and it starts to come in 14 days, or maybe it disappears for 2 months and then it
Yeah.
magically reappears. And to the point that you made earlier, you're not wearing white or pale, you know, colors because you're concerned that you might be sitting there at a board meeting and the next thing you
Mm-hmm.
know, there's a puddle, and the
Yeah.
puddle, you know, the puddle is pretty obvious what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's the thought is, well, you really aren't taking care of yourself. Did you not know? Well, if you're perimenopausal and you don't know what to anticipate, so that's one that's pretty clear sign.
Yeah.
That's probably happening in the earlier stages, right, of your perimenopause, and at that point you're still fertile, and
That's
so
right.
that's the other. So the when the old ladies, the old Italian ladies that I knew would get together and say, "Oh, she had a change of life baby." Well, that, they
Oh, I
would
love
refer
that.
to it as a change of life
I've never
baby.
heard that before.
And what they were really suggesting was that your fertility begins to decline at those early stages, but you are still capable of conceiving.
Yeah.
So using a non-hormonal method of birth control, and if you're in a committed relationship, obviously that it may not be necessary to use a condom. But if you're in a situation where you're not in a committed relationship, obviously a non-hormonal form of birth control plus a condom to prevent
Mm-hmm.
sexually transmitted infections is really important to us all.
That's right.
So you're still capable of conceiving. And the old Italian ladies would say, yeah, you know, she didn't think she was going to be able to conceive because she was 40. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And then there, you know, surprise,
The surprise
there
baby.
is that love child. So in among my siblings, we have a love child. And so it wasn't distressing to either of my parents, thank goodness, but it was a surprise nonetheless. My
Yeah.
mom thought that she was in that
Beyond that
stage,
stage.
and now she talks about it. So I love my mom. She's awesome, and we can giggle now that she's much older and more liberated in the way that
Yeah.
she and I can communicate with one
Yeah.
another. But the the change in your fertility is another sign that one should be aware of, but understand that it may not be the case that you are so-called safe.
That's
Uh,
right. That's right.
you can still conceive, so that is in one of the stages of perimenopause. And then there are those tests. So we hear about the endocrine tests.
Mm-hmm.
And let's chat for a minute about those endocrine tests.
Let's.
How reliable are those endocrine tests?
I am not a health practitioner myself. I've not had any hormonal testing. I've relied on my own research, and having discussions with my doctors. So I've known women who have tried the endocrine test, or the tests at home. I personally, I have not tried those myself, and I don't. I try not to judge what I don't understand or know, but I always start with having a discussion with your doctor and asking specific questions around that. So,
And that's really good advice because, to be very frank with you, the experts will tell you that endocrine tests alone don't necessarily tell
mhm,
the true tale, right?
right,
So reliance on symptoms is actually a better way to assess where you are. Now, if you wanted to know about your fertility, there are some endocrine tests that
for
you
that.
that a physician could perform, but really when it comes to menopause, because every woman is different, so you need to own your own menopause.
That's right.
And we may share some things in common. Maybe I've had hot flashes for a year. Maybe I haven't had hot flashes. Maybe I had these menstrual irregularities. But each woman needs to own her own menopause and be aware of the symptoms. So doing your research, tracking what your baseline is, and then trying to ascertain, well, wait a minute, how far beyond my baseline
Yeah.
is my menstrual cycle? So if you're menstruating every 28 days and before you know it, it's 61 days, that's a sign. If you're having night sweats, if you're having mood changes, if you're feeling more anxious. So you need to know your own baseline, and
Yeah.
how far do you stray from that baseline will give you an indication as to how your perimenopause is going in terms of the stages. And then thinking about when you are in menopause, you're not going to have a period, and it's going to be for an
Mhm.
extended period of time, right?
That's
So
right. That's
um,
right.
so
That's right.
you're not there yet. So we're really
I am not there yet. I'm still in perimenopause. I still do get my cycle monthly. I think I am one of those that is looking forward to when I don't get my cycle monthly. But I do have the full understanding that I will be fully menopausal after 12 consecutive months of not having a menstrual cycle. And so I still do it. It looks different every month, but I still get a monthly cycle. One of the other things, Jerry, that as you're talking about, and I think, oh, is this the irony of the condition, is brain fog. I mean, the brain fog, and I just feel compelled to raise it because we were having the conversation around how um, an irregular menstrual flow or a heavy menstrual flow also informs how we navigate, particularly in the workplace. Is I am finding that myself, that brain fog is real, in the form of forgetting my statement, mid statement, words. I have a very expansive vocabulary. I actually pride myself on that. I was an English literature major. I love words. And I cannot tell you the number of times where I can't remember what, in midstream, a statement. I can't remember what I was going to say, a word that I might use regularly in conversation, I'm struggling to find. And I do feel that I'm fortunate in that I have worked in aging services. And so I made a commitment that even in professional forums, when when it comes up, that I will say, I'm so sorry. I've lost my train of thought. I'm perimenopausal. I'm struggling with a bit of brain fog right now. I've been doing this consistently for about 2 or 3 years now. And oftentimes the response is met with an uncomfortable laughter. But what it does for me is it takes away that anxiety that I think just compounds when we start to, oh my God, I can't remember what I was going to say. What must they be thinking of me? I can't remember these words that I use. It takes some of that away, some of that anxiety build around I'm in this professional setting and I'm conveying as anything but. Uh, it's so important for me to model, right? Hey, this is what's going on. Hopefully that word will come back to me and we can loop back to it. And I have found I've never been met with negative response. Now, I'm not going to say that's always going to be the case, but it's so important, right, for me to be able to articulate in these settings what's going on with me, so that I can at least alleviate set the context, alleviate some anxiety, and move through it.
It's so important that we also destigmatize and remove that taboo, right? So the more
Yeah,
we talk about perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause being a normal transition, and again, it can occur at various chronological ages. That doesn't mean, so age is a number. That's it,
that's right.
right? And yes, your body will go through these changes, but taking that to the level that you do is really important. So using, the pause word and just taking a deep breath, right? Just taking a deep breath and admitting that, okay, at this particular juncture, I have, a bit of a lapse
Mm-hmm.
in my, thinking, and I need to take a moment. And you can either say that to yourself, I
That's
need to
right.
take a moment and step back, or I like your approach better, which is, folks, I need to take a moment. I need to take a moment.
That's right.
I'm experiencing perimenopausal symptoms. I need to take a moment. I talk with my team, of course, we're women's healthcare company, but I talk with my team, and I joke and I say, yeah, menopause, it's menopause. It's my menopause, my menopause, my
Yeah.
menopause. That it's a fact of life.
It is a fact of life. It is
It's
a
a
fact
fact
of
of
life.
life, and it's a natural transition. It's just, we've been transitioning since we were born. We
That's right.
transitioned in the womb. So,
That's right. That's right.
so
And how do we normalize it, right? How do we normalize it in the workplace and destigmatize it? And, my hope is that because Jerry, I've been fortunate to work remotely, but for me that has been an upside of pandemic. But before that, I was walking around the office looking at other women thinking, who else is feeling like this? I can't be the only person. And so that was part of why it was important for me to articulate it. And my goal is that, 5, 10 years from now, it's not met with an uncomfortable laughter or a quick diversion, right, to change the subject, but that it's, okay, got it. Thanks for sharing that with us. We understand. And we just continue on in discussion.
So when we have these conversations, we also believe that it's so important to include men in the
Yes.
conversation. We did a blog post and an interview with one of our scientific advisory council members who has been a gynecologist for over 20 years, and the topic was why every man needs a gynecologist, right? So it's important that, right, it's important to have that mutual respect. By the way, men are going through their own things. We're not
Yeah.
That's not the subject of this podcast. But it is important if you have a male partner, but if you have a same-sex partner, it's also important to have that conversation, because your male partner clearly doesn't have the equipment that we have: the ovaries, the uterus, the vagina, the vulva, the clitoris, important part of the body, very important part of the
Very
body.
important part.
So he doesn't have those body parts, so providing that education is important and helping him to understand, no, you're not you. Yes, it could be a serious medical condition if you are having dysfunctional uterine bleeding that causes this problem every month, and if there's pain and if there's bloating and other signs, maybe time to call the doctor, maybe
Yeah.
time to have that visit. But he needs to know, no, I'm not dying. Or by the way, I may be uncomfortable having sex with you because I
Yeah.
have not stopped bleeding for 12 days. It is very heavy.
That's
And
right.
unless we want to change the linens several times during the act, it may not be the most convenient time for
That's
us
right.
to be
And it might not, and it might not be comfortable for
exactly.
me.
And it,
Yeah,
and by the way, we're not obligated to have intercourse with our partners.
that's right.
So it's really,
But
about
you see, to that point, Jerry, I'm in a number of community forums, perimenopause, menopause support, and and the stress and the frustration and the burden that women are carrying around vaginal dryness or just lack of desire, and the implications that it's having in the relationships with their partners, even kind of the moodiness, right, where they um, it is affecting very much relationships. And I see so many women struggling, thinking that it's them, right? That they're doing something wrong. And so that's why it's all the more important for conversations like this one that you're leading and that you lead on your podcast, but for us to do more of it. And so women are not so alone and
absolutely,
blaming themselves.
absolutely. And you touched on the very sensitive topic of the vagina and the vulva and the clitoris, which we often talk about the vagina and the vulva.
Mm-hmm.
Our pleasure center is the clitoris.
Yes, thank goodness for the clitoris.
Yes, exactly. And we deserve pleasure.
We
It's
do.
sin. We deserve pleasure. Our partners need to understand that. But if your vulva and your vagina are dry, it makes the touch part
Mm-hmm.
feel pretty awful. So when we speak with women like yourself and others, and our scientific advisory council and healthcare practitioners, what they tell us is women are really embarrassed
Mm.
to admit that they may have vaginal and vulvar dryness.
Yeah.
Now, this condition will affect 1 out of every 2 women between the ages of 40
I did not know that.
and 70, and it's chronic and persistent. If you don't take
Yeah.
care of your vagina and your
Yeah.
the problem won't go away. So you got to take care of it if you want it. And it's not just a sex thing. So, yes, we want to make sure that we have adequate lubrication during intercourse, but it's really about vaginal and vulvar moisturization. Because if your vulva is itchy,
Mm-hmm.
burning, and if your vagina is sore, then it doesn't make sex very pleasurable. But
Yeah.
you can't just do this mid-act. Hold on, let me get up. Let me get the
Mm-hmm.
Mia Vita personal lubricant and vaginal moisturizer. Use that product to help you to take care of your life, which is why we named the
Yeah.
product Mia Vita. It's about you. It's about your self-care. And I know you are a big proponent of self-care. I love your blog.
Thank you. Thank
And,
you.
and women need to remember they need to take time for themselves. And by the way, the vulva, vagina, the clitoris, they are all mucosal surfaces, which means they need more tender, loving care. So
That's
just
right.
as you would moisturize those eyes or your mouth if you have dry mouth or this beautiful skin,
Mm-hmm.
you need to also take care of the skin, that intimate skin. And that's what we forget as women. We stop at the waist.
Yeah. No, it's so important. I mean, and this falls under self-care. It's to your point, I've spoken to so many women who get to this life stage and feel like pleasure is either a frivolity or something that they're no longer entitled to. And that's why we have to keep talking about this, and we have to keep talking about what products and solutions are out there that can help with this, like Mia Vita, because I'm 47, yes, soon to be 48. Um, I also know that God willing, and if I remain in good health, I will likely live another 40 years. And I want a quality and healthy sexual experience to be a part of that. I want to enjoy sex with my partner. And so, what does it look like for me to take care of myself, right? And to be able to enjoy that well into my future years. So, it's something we should be talking more about. Women should care for ourselves. We should be caring for ourselves and know that we are entitled to pleasure throughout our life stage.
Absolutely. So before we end our podcast together, I want you to remind women of what you've created, where they can find your site, your blog posts, because you are definitely one of the strongest women advocates for this area. And we want women to know about you. And we are just so excited that you are joining Love Mia Vita podcast.
Oh, thank you.
There's got to be a part two.
I
So
would love it. We can have a part 2, 3, 4, however many times you're willing to have me on. I'm glad to join. And yes, you can learn more about me and read the blog and the work I'm trying to do to connect women to share information about what's working for them and what's not at menopausemademodern.com. I also am posting content on Instagram, and that's at Meno Made Modern, and you can follow me there or on Twitter. And yeah, it's there. I also do some wraparound content that is tailored for women of color. And you might come there and think it's not for you. You do see more black and brown hues, but the content is designed for anybody who will find it of use. And so please, yeah, check us out at menopausemademodern.com.
Kamili Wilson, it has been my pleasure to have a conversation with you on the Love Mia Vita podcast, and I can't wait for the next time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Be well.